Episode 4. Shadows of the canyon. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beneath the unrelenting midday sun, its golden sand shimmering like a sea of molten glass, rippling with heat waves that distorted the jagged horizon. The canyon loomed ahead, a dark maw carved into the earth, its towering walls rising like the remnants of a forgotten world, promising both refuge and peril. The gulch's floodwaters had receded hours ago, leaving behind a muddy scar that wound through the landscape, the damp earth releasing a faint, earthy scent that mingled with the dry tang of sagebrush. The air was heavy, the silence broken only by the occasional whistle of the wind and the soft crunch of boots against the sand. Jacob Kane trudged at the forefront, his weathered boots sinking into the softened ground with each step, his silver-streaked, black hair damp with sweat that traced lines down his scarred face. His shoulder, grazed by a bullet in the gulch fight, throbbed beneath the frayed fabric of his worn shirt, a dull ache that pulsed with every movement. Yet his Winchester rifle hung ready at his side, its weight a familiar comfort, its barrel glinting faintly in the harsh light. Beside him, Nita limped slightly, her leg bandaged with a strip of cloth torn from the hem of her traditional Navajo dress, the fabric now a muted patchwork of red and brown from the desert's dust. Her dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the horizon with a mix of hope and wariness. Her posture upright despite the strain. The cut on her arm, hastily bound during their escape, had scabbed over, but the memory of the bullet that had grazed. Her leg lingered in her tightened jaw. She carried no weapon now, her dagger sheathed at her waist, its hilt worn smooth by her grip, a silent testament to the battles they'd survived. Behind them, the Navajo women followed their footsteps, light but determined, a silent procession against the vastness of the desert. Shima led the group, her silver hair glinting like threads of moonlight in the sunlight, her small bow slung over her shoulder, the string taut from recent use. Her face, lined with the wisdom of decades, held a quiet strength, her eyes scanning the terrain with the precision of a seasoned tracker. Owi, the young girl barely 16, walked close to Shima, her arms cradling her newborn. The child's soft coos, a fragile melody that rose and fell with the rhythm of her steps. The baby's tiny face, nestled against Owi's chest, was a beacon of innocence amid the harshness, its eyes closed in a peaceful slumber. Tala and Kiona flanked the group, their daggers sheathed, but their postures alert. Their movements fluid like the desert wind, their gazes darting to every shadow. The scout, still bound with a leather strap around his wrist, stumbled behind, his face pale with exhaustion and fear, his earlier defiance replaced by the stark reality of his captivity. His boots dragged in the sand, leaving uneven tracks that marked their path toward the canyon. 3 days' ride from the gulch where they'd left Ward's body to the flood. "We're close," Nita said, her voice steady despite the strain that tightened her throat. She paused, shading her eyes with a hand to peer at the canyon's dark entrance, its shadows deepening as the sun climbed higher. Lila knows these lands better than anyone. If she's alive, she'll be waiting near the old waterhole where the pines grow thick. Jacob nodded, his mind drifting to the Lajura rolled parchment that held proof of Ward's crimes, a weapon against the powerful men who had orchestrated the massacres of Navajo villages. The thought of it fueled his steps, a fire stoked by the memory of the innocents lost, including his own family years ago. But the scout's warning from the gulch echoed in his ears. Trackers and worse were on their trail, men hired by Wards, masters to erase the evidence and silence its bearers. He glanced back, the desert empty, but for the wind stirring the sand into faint, shifting patterns. "We need to move faster," he said, his voice rough with the dust that coated his throat. "They'll catch our scent soon, blood, smoke, or tracks. We can't afford to linger." The group pressed on, the canyon's shadow growing larger with each step, its walls rising like the jaws of a beast ready to swallow them whole. The air cooled slightly as they neared, carrying the faint scent of pine from hidden crevices, where moisture clung to life. Sun beat down, its rays reflecting off the sandstone, casting a golden haze that blurred the edges of the landscape. Jacob's shoulder ached with every movement, a reminder of the bullet that had grazed him, but he pushed the pain aside, focusing on the path ahead. Nita matched his pace, her limp less pronounced now, her determination a mirror to his own. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the silence, a high, clear note that seemed to dance on the wind. Nita's eyes widened, hope flaring like a spark in the desert dusk. "Lila," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. She quickened her step, ignoring the twinge in her leg, her gaze fixed on the canyon's mouth where the sound had originated. A figure emerged from the shadows, a young Navajo woman. Her face a mirror to Nita's, her features softened by youth, but hardened by survival. Her dress, once vibrant with traditional patterns, was tattered, the edges frayed from days of flight. But her stance was defiant, her dark eyes burning with the same fire as her sister's. In her hands she clutched a rolled parchment, the map and ledger held tightly against her chest as if it were her lifeline. "Sister," Nita cried, rushing forward, her arms opening, only to freeze as a shadow moved behind Lila. A man in a dark coat stepped into view, his face obscured by the wide brim of a black hat, a revolver gleaming in his hand, its barrel. Catching the sunlight like a predator's eye, "Drop it," the man growled, his voice cold and devoid of mercy, the words slicing through the tension like a knife. His finger hovered near the trigger, the revolver steady despite the heat that rippled the air. Jacob raised his rifle in an instant, the stock pressing against his shoulder, his finger curling around the trigger. But before he could fire, Tala and Kiona darted forward with the speed of desert hawks, their daggers flashing in the sunlight. The man swung his revolver toward them, firing a shot that echoed off the canyon walls with a deafening crack, the bullet missing as it buried itself in the sand. Tala tackled him, her lithe form driving him to the ground with a thud, while Kiona disarmed him, her dagger pressing against his wrist until the revolver skittered across the sand. Glinting as it came to rest near a boulder, Lila ran to Nita, the parchment still clutched in her hands, tears streaking her dust-covered face as she threw her arms around her sister. "I thought you were dead," she sobbed, her voice muffled against Nita's shoulder. Nita held her tightly, her own eyes glistening. "We're here now. The ledger's safe." Jacob pinned the man down, his knee pressing into the tracker's chest, the rifle now aimed at his head. "Who is he?" he demanded, his voice a low growl, the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "A tracker," Lila gasped, pulling back from Nita to wipe her eyes. "Sent by Ward's masters? They know we're alive. Someone saw the flood and reported." "Back." The man smirked, despite the dagger at his throat and the weight of Jacob's knee. "You're dead already," he spat, his voice hoarse. "More are coming, men who don't negotiate. The ledger's a death sentence, and you're all marked." Jacob's grip tightened on the rifle, his mind racing. "Da da 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 da. The threat of Ward's successors loomed larger than ever, a shadow cast by men with power and wealth beyond his imagining. He glanced at Nita, their eyes meeting across the distance, a silent agreement forming in that shared gaze. Her strength bolstered his, a partnership forged in the fires of battle. "We need to get to safety," he said, his voice steady. "Read the ledger. Find their names." Lila unrolled the parchment, her fingers trembling as she traced the faded ink, the paper crackling softly in the still air. "Senators, railroad barons' names I've heard whispered in fear," she said, her voice growing firmer with each word.
Arrington Voss.
"Caldwell, they paid Ward to clear our land, to build their tracks and mines. This lists every crime, every village burned." Nita took the ledger, her resolve hardening as she scanned the names. "These men will stop at nothing," she said. "We have to use this against them." As she spoke, a distant rumble shook the ground, a vibration that traveled up Jacob's legs and into his chest. He climbed a nearby rock, shading his eyes against the sun, and spotted a dust cloud on the horizon, growing larger with each passing second. "Riders," he warned, his voice sharp. At least 10, maybe more. Nita's hand tightened on the ledger, her eyes narrowing. We fight or we die. This ends here. They took cover among the canyon's boulders, the women positioning themselves with weapons ready. Shima's bow sang, the first arrow streaking through the air with a soft whistle, striking a rider's shoulder and forcing him to veer off course, his horse rearing in protest. Tala and Kiona moved like phantoms, their daggers flashing as they struck from the shadows, their blades finding marks with silent precision. Jacob fired his rifle, each shot a calculated strike, the reports echoing off the canyon walls, thinning the enemy ranks as riders fell one by one, but the numbers were against them. A bullet grazed Jacob's arm, a hot sting that drew a hiss from his lips, and Nita pulled him behind a rock, her hand steadying him as she pressed against his side. Her touch was firm, a fleeting comfort in the chaos, her breath warm against his ear. "We can't win this," she said, her voice low and urgent, "but we can outlast them." A plan formed in Jacob's mind lured the riders into a narrow pass where the canyon's walls would bottleneck them, turning their numbers into a disadvantage. He signaled the women, his hand cutting through the air with a sharp gesture, and they retreated, drawing the enemy deeper into the canyon. Pass loomed ahead, its walls tightening like a vice, the air growing cooler as the sunlight dimmed. Jacob set a trap, rolling a boulder with Tala's help to block the rear, the stone grinding against the ground with a rumble that masked their movements. The riders charged into the choke point, their horses' hooves thundering, and the women struck. Shima's arrows rained down, each shot a deadly melody that felled a rider, her hands steady despite the trembling of her years. Tala and Kiona emerged from the sides, their daggers flashing in the dim light, striking with ruthless efficiency as the riders struggled to maneuver. Jacob's rifle barked, each shot a precise counter to the enemy's advance, the canyon amplifying the sound into a cacophony of war. But the leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek and a cold glint in his eye, broke through, his horse charging toward Nita with unrelenting speed. Nita stood her ground, her dagger raised, her stance a blend of defiance and desperation. But Jacob intercepted, tackling the man from his saddle with a force that sent them both crashing to the sand. They grappled, the man's strength matching Jacob's, his fists pounding against Jacob's ribs as they rolled. Dust rose in a choking cloud, the heat of the struggle mingling with the cool canyon air. Nita's dagger found the man's leg, the blade sinking just enough to force a cry from his lips, and he yielded. Collapsing under Jacob's weight, the remaining riders, seeing their leader fall, turned and fled, their hoofbeats fading into the distance as the canyon fell silent once more. Jacob and Nita leaned against a boulder, breathless, the ledger safe in Lila's hands as she joined them, her eyes wide with relief. Nita's hand lingered on Jacob's arm, her touch a warmth that steadied his racing heart, her fingers brushing against the graze on his skin. "We did it," she whispered, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion, her dark eyes reflecting the canyon's shadows. "For now," Jacob replied, his voice soft, rough with emotion. He looked at her, the sunlight catching the lines of her face, and felt a pull, a connection that transcended the battle, a promise of something yet to come. But this war's just beginning. Episode 4 End, Echoes of Power. Episode 4 brings Jacob and Nita to the canyon, reuniting with Lila and securing the ledger. But new trackers from Ward's masters threaten their quest. Who are the powerful men behind the massacres, and can love blossom amid the shadows?
Ow.
Tune in for episode 5 to uncover the ledger's full secrets. If you're hooked on this saga, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to catch every thrilling moment. Share your theories on the trackers in the comments below.